Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Well, as I stated yesterday, let me remind you, this is going to be a very short week for me. This is Thanksgiving week, obviously, day after tomorrow. And as I mentioned, I'm going to take off from my filming and what have you a day early. As I mentioned, it's not really going to be time off per se. I'm going to be deep in the books. By the way, I mentioned this book to you, the Danielic Eschatological Hour in the Johannine literature. I have read a great deal of this book. I'm going to go back and reread some more in the midst of all the other reading that I'm doing. Really, it's a fantastic book in many, many ways. Are there bones in it? Well, yeah, sure. There are bones in just about anything. But again, it's called the Danielic Eschatological Hour in the Johannine literature by Stephanos Mahelios. So, for those of you who are into reading some good scholarly literature, I recommend that book. It's one of those books that you read and you go, oh my goodness, how's he not a preterist? I mean, he makes some really, really fantastic applications showing John's use of Daniel, showing that John believed that Daniel was being fulfilled. Well, if Daniel was being fulfilled, that means John was being fulfilled, and that means the end is not 2,000 years away from John. Okay, I introduced to you yesterday 1 John. In 1 John, the writer says, notice, and I urge you to do this yesterday, in 1 John 2 and verse 8, John said, a new commandment I give unto you, and I write these things unto you, which is true and in him and in you, because the darkness is, present active indicative, passing away, and the true light is already shining. Now, what you have to understand here is that darkness and light are eschatological motifs. Darkness is representative of this present evil age. By the way, darkness is also representative, symbolic of death. This is found throughout the entirety of the Old Testament. Darkness is death. So to say darkness is passing away is to say death is passing away. Now, I'm not going to take the time to document that on today's video, but I recommend that you really do some research on this. Number one, it's a fascinating study. Number two, it's rewarding. Number three, it's extremely revealing in regard to the eschatological predictions of the passing of the darkness. Just go to look at Romans 13:11 and following. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. Therefore, it is high time. It's the hour, that's the Danielic hour, for the resurrection. The hour has come to wake out of sleep. Sleep? They're not physically dead, are they? No. But it's all about resurrection. The night is passing away. So in 1 John, John says, the night is passing away. The true light is already shining. Now, I called your attention to verse 18. Little children, it is the last hour. As you have heard that Antichrist should come, even now there are many Antichrists in this world, whereby you know it is the last hour. Now watch this. John said, little children, it's the last hour. You heard that Antichrist would come before the end. Where have they heard that? Who had taught that Antichrist, false prophets, false Christ would come before the end? Oh, I know. Jesus said that. There shall be many false prophets. There shall many men come saying, I am he. False prophets, false messiahs, antichrists. You heard that it was going to come. Come when? Before the end. Before the last hour. The last hour, hour of resurrection. John 5, 28 and 29. You heard it was going to happen. Wait a minute. Hang on. What did Paul say? Speaking of the man of sin. And I know the term false or Antichrist is not in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, but the concept that we're dealing with is found in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Many false prophets, many Antichrists have come. You heard it was coming. So, if Jesus was talking about the appearance of false messiahs, false prophets before, quote, the end, before the last day, and he did predict that, obviously, because after all, many false prophets, many false Christs shall come. This is the time of the abomination of desolation. This is the time of the great tribulation, and immediately after the tribulation of those days. Of what days? The days of the appearance of the false prophets, false messiahs. Immediately after that, the Son of Man would come. So if John says that the false messiahs were already there, and if John says, not if, since John says the false messiahs, since they were there, it was the last hour, guess what that means? That means that the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory was about to come very, very soon. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to be unkind here, but what kind of nonsense does it make to call attention to what Jesus said? There'll be many false prophets that will arise before the end and lead away the majority. Many false messiahs will come and lead away the elect. And then immediately after the tribulation of those days, the Son of Man will come. And then we have John calling attention to that very prophecy, saying they're here and it's the last hour, and yet we're supposed to believe that the end of the last hour hasn't happened for 2,000 years. That doesn't even make good nonsense. And yet, in their utter desperation to destroy the time statements of eminence, some former preterists say, well, John's reference here to the last hour, that refers to the entirety of the Christian enterprise. Because after all, Jesus said the hour is coming in which the dead shall hear his voice. That's speaking of the call of the gospel. Therefore, the last hour must refer to the entirety of the Christian enterprise. So what that demands is that John was saying, the way that you know that the Christian age, the Christian enterprise has come is because you heard that false messiahs would come before the last hour. Do you see what I mean when I say that doesn't even make good nonsense? The presence of Antichrist are supposedly the definitive proof that the Christian enterprise has arrived? What kind of logic? No, better to ask, what kind of desperation causes one to invent such an incredibly illogical affirmation and commentary? Brethren, it's the last hour. Christian age is here. The Christian enterprise is here. Praise God. We've got 3 or 4 or 5 gazillion years now. No, it's the last hour. You heard that Antichrist should come, Paul said the man of sin would come and would be destroyed at the coming of the Lord, the parousia. So, if these antichrists equate in some way, somehow, directly to the man of sin and the operation of the man of sin, the spirit of lawlessness in 2 Thessalonians, since he was already there, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 5 and following, since he was already there, he was here in 1 John chapter 2, since he was already alive when John wrote, and would be destroyed at the coming of the Lord, guess what? Then the coming of the Lord had to have occurred in the lifetime of those false messiahs. Because it was not a prediction that, generation after generation after generation after generation, there will be false prophets. No, that wasn't the point. What should be the sign of the end of the age? Well, there will be false messiahs who come saying, I'm he. And it won't do to say, we've had false messiahs for a long, long time now. No, won't work. John said these who were alive when he wrote were the fulfillment of what Jesus and Paul predicted. Hey, listen, thank you so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Again, short week. This will be the last video for this week. Please have a fantastic, safe, and enjoyable Thanksgiving holiday. Look to see you a little over a week from now, a little less than a week from now. God bless. See you then.